Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, April 5th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will see a high temperature reaching about 67 degrees, with the low dipping down to around 51 degrees later tonight, making for a mild spring day. Coming up on today's show, we explore the legislative strategies Senate Republicans might use to push forward extensions of the tax cuts enacted during the Trump presidency. We will also delve into the specific reasons cited by the Trump administration when it chose to deny Medicare coverage for certain popular obesity drugs. We have got the details on these important policy discussions. All that is coming up right here on Alex's News, so stick around. We're starting this morning with major developments out of Washington, where Senate Republicans pushed through a significant budget blueprint overnight. Joining us now is our political reporter, Ethan, to unpack this complex story. Ethan, this sounds like it was quite the marathon session in the Senate.
It certainly was, Grace. According to reporting from WFTV citing the Associated Press and confirmed by WRAL News, after a late-night, all-night session, Senate Republicans narrowly approved a budget framework, 51-48. It was largely along party lines, although WFTV notes Republican Senators Susan Collins and Rand Paul actually voted against it.
Interesting to see some dissent within the party ranks. So what's the headline goal of this framework? It feels a bit like copyright déjà vu from President Trump's first term, doesn't it?
You're right, there are definite echoes. The central aim, as reported by WFTV and the Economic Times, is paving the way to extend the big 2017 Trump tax cuts, most of which are set to expire at the end of this year, just about 8 months from now. Proponents argue this prevents a tax hike for most American families. And yes, it sets up the use of those special budget rules known as reconciliation.
Reconciliation. That's a term we hear a lot, but might not fully grasp. Can you break that down?
Absolutely. Reconciliation, as explained by WFTV and Perplexity API analyses, is essentially a procedural tool. It allows certain budget-related bills to pass the Senate with just a simple majority 51 votes instead of the usual 60 needed to overcome a filibuster. It's how Republicans plan to push this tax and spending package through without needing Democratic support in the Senate, much like they did back in 2017.
Got it. So preventing tax hikes is the main driver. But what else is tucked into this Senate framework? Are there new tax breaks or significant spending items we should know about?
There are, beyond just extending the old cuts. The Economic Times and Perplexity API mention the Senate version considers new breaks, potentially on tipped wages and Social Security income. Their ES also talk of possibly tweaking the cap on state and local tax deductions, known as SALT. On the spending side, it's substantial. The Economic Times and WFTV report, the framework includes $175 billion earmarked for mass deportation efforts and another $175 billion for the Pentagon and military buildup.
$175 billion for deportations, $175 billion for the military. That adds up quickly. This must raise questions about the national debt, surely. It seems like a quote, or at the refi. It seems like a quote, or quote.
It absolutely is, Grace. That's the major point of contention. Multiple analyses cited by WFTV, the Economic Times, and Perplexity API project that just extending the tax cuts will add trillions, potentially up to $5 trillion over 10 years, according to some analyses, to the national debt. Republicans justify this partly with supply-side arguments, the idea that tax cuts boost the economy enough to eventually pay for themselves, at least partially. They also use what's called a current policy baseline, essentially arguing they're just maintaining the status quo, not adding new costs compared to asterisk if the cuts were already permanent. But as you noted, and as the Economic Times and WFTV report, fiscal conservatives like Senator Rand Paul and even Senator Bill Cassidy have voiced serious concerns about the deficit impact.
So internal GOP disagreements are bubbling up. How are Democrats reacting to all this?
Predictably, with strong opposition, WFTV and the Economic Times detail how Democrats slammed the framework during the debate, calling it a giveaway to corporations and the wealthy. They tried forcing votes on amendments to block tax breaks for high earners, end Trump's tariffs, and protect social safety nets like Medicaid and Social Security. But those efforts failed along party lines. Their big fear, highlighted by the Economic Times and Perplexity API, is that this framework sets the stage for deep cuts to those vital programs down the line.
It sounds like the battle lines are clearly drawn. What's the next step in this process? Does this Senate vote mean it's a done deal?
Not yet. The action now shifts to the House of Representatives. WFTV and the Economic Times report that Speaker Mike Johnson is expected to bring the framework up for a vote there soon. But here's the key challenge. The House and Senate GOP have passed different versions, and now they need to reconcile those differences, pun slightly intended.
Okay, so they need to find common ground. What are the major sticking points between the House and Senate versions?
Perplexity API analysis, along with reports from WFTV and the Economic Times, highlight some significant gaps. The House GOP's version calls for much deeper, immediate spending cuts, potentially $2 trillion, explicitly targeting programs like Medicaid and food stamps. The Senate version started with only modest cuts up front, planning for committees to find more later. They also differ on the debt limit increase. The House proposed $4 trillion, the Senate $5 trillion. And fundamentally, they differ on whether tax cuts need to be fully offset by spending cuts, which many House conservatives demand. Bridging these gaps, especially on spending cuts, will be tough.
It certainly sounds like a complex legislative path ahead, with major disagreements still to be ironed out, particularly concerning those social programs. Ethan, thank you for navigating us through the details of this significant budget development this morning.
Happy to do it, Grace.
We're turning now to a significant policy shift affecting millions of Americans, particularly seniors on Medicare. The Trump administration has made a final decision regarding coverage for popular anti-obesity drugs. Joining us to break down this weighty issue is our news reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what exactly has the administration decided?
Grace, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, confirmed around April 4th that it will not extend Medicare Part D coverage to anti-obesity medications like Wegovy and Zepbound when they're prescribed primarily for weight loss. This reverses a potential policy change that was proposed under the previous Biden administration. ABC News and WFMJ first reported on this confirmation.
A reversal? That sounds like a major change in direction. What's the reasoning behind pulling back on this proposed coverage?
There are several key factors, Grace. Firstly, the cost is a huge concern. According to estimates from the Congressional Budget Office and CMS itself, covering these drugs broadly for obesity could cost taxpayers up to $35 billion over the next decade. Perplexity API analysis highlights that drugs like Wegovy can run about $1,000 a month per patient, potentially pushing annual Medicare costs towards $34 billion by 2034. That high price tag, as ABC News noted, has already made many private insurers hesitant. It seems the potential cost weighed heavily on the decision.
$35 billion is certainly not pocket change. Were there other factors besides the cost?
Absolutely. The administration is pointing to the existing law. As CBS News and Perplexity API analysis detail, federal statute currently prohibits Medicare Part D from covering drugs when used for weight loss. The Biden administration had tried to reinterpret this by classifying obesity as a chronic disease, hoping to bypass the restriction. However, the current CMS leadership under Dr. Mehmet Oz has deemed that reinterpretation effort not appropriate, according to a CMS spokesperson cited by CBS News. They're sticking to a very strict reading of the law.
So a legal interpretation and cost concerns. Anything else driving this?
Yes, there appears to be a philosophical element as well. ABC News and WFMJ reported that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been skeptical about relying heavily on injectable pharmaceuticals for weight management. Perplexity API analysis adds that he's previously advocated for nutritional solutions, suggesting access to healthy food might be a better approach. CBS News even reported that top advisors to Secretary Kennedy Jr. criticized the Biden-era proposal quite strongly, calling it inconsistent with the administration's Make America Healthy Again principles.
It's interesting you mentioned the Biden administration's proposal. Can you remind us what they were trying to achieve?
Certainly. As reported by ABC News, CBS News, and WFMJ, the previous administration sought to change how CMS interpreted that existing statute. By framing obesity as a chronic disease, they argued these drugs weren't just for cosmetic weight loss, but for treating a serious health condition, much like how Medicare covers drugs for AIDS-related weight issues. Their plan also looked at extending coverage through Medicaid for lower-income individuals.
Okay, so the administration says no coverage starved for weight loss. But Chloe, isn't there a bit of a wrinkle here? Aren't these exact same, very expensive drugs sometimes covered by Medicare right now?
That's the crucial nuance, Grace, and it can be confusing. Yes, Medicare Part D Topter does already cover drugs like Wegovy in certain situations. As ABC News, WFMJ, and Perplexity API analysis confirm, Wegovy is covered if it's prescribed specifically to reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes in patients who already have cardiovascular disease. Similarly, related drugs like Ozempic are covered for managing type 2 diabetes.
So how do they square that circle? Covering it for heart benefits, but not for the obesity that often causes the heart problems.
It boils down to the primary reason for the prescription, according to Perplexity API's analysis of the policy. The law bans coverage, quote, when used for weight loss. The administration interprets this strictly. If the FDA-approved reason for prescribing it is primarily weight loss, it's not covered. If the primary FDA-approved reason is cardiovascular risk reduction or diabetes management A, even though weight loss is a major effect and benefit A, then it can be covered under the current rules. They're drawing a sharp line based on the drug's specific approved indication, not just its overall effect.
That's a fine line indeed. What's the public feeling on this, and how does this fit into the bigger picture?
It's a mixed bag. Polls mentioned by ABC News and WFMJ suggest the public generally supports Medicare covering these drugs. Advocates argue treating obesity could save money long-term by preventing related diseases. And interestingly, ABC News reported over a dozen state Medicaid programs already cover these drugs for obesity, showing a split between this federal decision and some state policies. But again, that high cost remains a significant hurdle everywhere.
So a complex situation with significant financial and health implications. Thanks, Chloe, for clarifying that for us.
You're welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Iran's currency, the rial, has plummeted to a record low against the US dollar, trading at roughly 1,043,000 rials per dollar. This significant drop follows a long holiday period in Iran and comes amid heightened tensions with the United States and ongoing international sanctions, particularly those reimposed after the US withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. The economic pressure, worsened by inflation and reduced oil sales, has led many Iranians to seek refuge in hard currencies or assets like cryptocurrencies. The uncertainty is palpable, with currency traders in Tehran reportedly turning off electronic exchange rate signs. This economic turmoil has also fueled political instability, contributing to the impeachment of the finance minister earlier this year over the currency crisis. In Southern California, 2 U.S. Border Patrol officers, Farlis Almonte and Ricardo Rodriguez, face federal charges for allegedly taking thousands of dollars in bribes. Stationed at the busy San Isidro port of entry, they are accused of waving through individuals without proper documentation. Investigators uncovered phone communications with human traffickers in Mexico, unexplained cash deposits, and surveillance footage showing undocumented passengers entering the U.S. officer. Almonte may face additional charges for money laundering and obstruction after nearly $70,000 in cash was seized from his romantic partner, allegedly en route to Tijuana. This case follows other instances of corruption involving border officials in the region. Meanwhile, an unusual scene unfolded in a New York appeals court when a plaintiff representing himself, Jerome DeWald, attempted to use an AI-generated avatar to argue his employment dispute case. The avatar, appearing as a smiling young man, began addressing the court, prompting Justice Sally Manzanet Daniels to intervene. Upon learning it was AI and that the court hadn't been informed beforehand, the justice expressed displeasure at the lack of transparency and ordered the video feed shut off. DeWald later explained he used the avatar to avoid stumbling over words. This incident highlights the growing complexities and ethical questions surrounding the use of AI in legal proceedings. Former U.S. Representative George Santos is facing sentencing after pleading guilty last August to federal charges, including wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Prosecutors are seeking a prison term of more than 7 years, arguing his crimes, which involved defrauding donors, filing false reports, and stealing identities, mocked the U.S. election system. Santos's lawyers are requesting the minimum 2-year sentence. As part of his plea deal, Santos agreed to nearly $375,000 in restitution and $205,000 in forfeiture. Since his expulsion from Congress, Santos has reportedly earned over $800,000 from appearances and a documentary. His sentencing is scheduled for April 25th, and finally, severe weather continues to plague parts of the South and Midwest. Already waterlogged regions are bracing for more torrential rain and catastrophic flash flooding through Saturday. Millions have faced evacuation orders due to what's been described as 1 in 1,000-year flooding, which has tragically claimed at least one life in Kentucky. Forecasters warn of continued significant, life-threatening flash floods capable of sweeping away cars, alongside the risk of intense tornadoes and large hail. Areas along the Mississippi River near Memphis, the lower Ohio Valley, the Mid-South, and the Ozarks are particularly vulnerable. Emergency crews are active, and FEMA is prepared to distribute aid. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.